Tim's news explosion. 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 Tim's news explosion.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's Tim's News Explosion on this Monday, the 17th of March, 2025. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Viewers will notice that I'm wearing green tonight. That's not because I'm Irish, but because St. Patrick's Day has become part of our Australian culture, not just because of our Irish immigrants, but also because it's an excuse to get drunk if you can afford it, though, under the inflation and government beer excise, although Albo has frozen the beer excise for a couple of years, which means it just won't go up. It certainly won't go down. We are live on the Wilmsfront YouTube channel, the Wilmsfront Rumble channel, and on my Wilmsfront X account. Hello to everyone in the chat. Tricky Woo, good to see you again. It is 8:30 p.m. here in Melbourne, Victoria, where our Premier Jacinta Allen is getting tough on crime, or at least that's what she wants you to believe. So she made a two-pronged announcement last week. The first one was on Wednesday. So this is from her official Premier website. Tough bail laws to keep Victorians safe. So the primary purpose of the amendment to the Bail Act that she is going to legislate is actually a backflip from what her and Dan Andrews introduced 2 years ago. So this amendment will put community safety above all in bail decisions and remove the principle of remand as a last resort for all offenders, including young people and children. So many of you would say, shouldn't that community safety be above all else consideration? And this is because we have seen an increase. The crime statistics bear this out in aggravated burglaries. And then, of course, there's the carjackings, home invasions, which are regulated burglary, and the robberies with machetes at shops, and also the machete fights in the streets. And this was the announcement from Jacinta Allen the next day, which was a total ban on machetes. Now, they already are illegal. So they're already a controlled weapon, which means they cannot be possessed or carried without a lawful excuse. So the government, they describe machetes as long cutting-edge knives with a blade of more than 20 centimeters. So are they going to be really sharp knives that are not going to be counted as machetes? So under the new laws, Victorians who have legitimate purpose for them, such as farmers or hunters, will be required to apply for an exemption. But if you're caught carrying a machete, then there'll be the maximum penalty is imprisonment of 2 years, and also there'll be expanded search areas for weapons. It'll be for a maximum, they can have a designated area search for weapons 6 months. So I wonder if that means it will be around about Sunshine Station permanently, which of course the Allen government has promised to upgrade at a cost of over $2 billion. We'll get to shortly why that's going to be so expensive. But we had on Friday evening, immediately after this announcement, is that there was a fatal machete attack at Marriott Waters Shopping Centre, which is in Lyndhurst. It's which is just past Cranbourne. So this was I've been informed by a source that this was South Sudanese tribal warfare. So the young man who was, do we have to say, allegedly macheted to death, who was of South Sudanese appearance, 9 or more young Sudanese men eyewitnessed 3 machetes being waved in the air and physically seeing them coming down. He made a run for it, stumbled into a pizza shop where he collapsed. You could hear him gurgling. There was blood. The man was helped by a staff member until emergency services arrived after 8:30 p.m., finding him with serious stab wounds. Police believe this was a targeted attack and searching up for 10 men of African appearance. Well, their South Sudanese appearance and a white Hyundai Kiner. Now, I know that shopping centre from when I lived in the city of Casey. It looks quite nice on the outside, very new, modern, but it doesn't look like it's that safe after dark. And at Frankston train station yesterday, there was a machete-wielding man arrested by police. Thankfully, he didn't harm anyone, but it's the second serious violent crime incident in the city of Frankston in the past 2 weeks. Obviously, that attempted carjacking at China's car wash in Frankston, where a man of African appearance attempted to carjack this woman who was cleaning a car, and he tried to slash her with a piece of metal. Now, also last week, we had the Victorian Labor Party have it was called a Chinese town hall event at Box Hill Town Hall, which it was advertised on Try Booking and the Chinese social media WeChat. So Penny Wong was billed, so was former Victorian Premier Dan Andrews. The member for Chisholm, Labor's Dr. Karina Garland, the Labor member for Aston, the neighbouring electorate, Mary Doyle, the federal Labor candidate for the seat of Menzies, Gabrielle Ng, and the Labor candidate for the seat of Deakin, Matt Gregg. Now, on the day of the event, which was last Wednesday, it was cancelled by Try Booking. Now, a number of freedom activists were planning to attend, and they rang up Box Hill Town Hall to say if the event had been cancelled. They were told no, it hadn't been cancelled, but the Try Booking tickets, they weren't honoured because the event had been cancelled, but the WeChat tickets had been honoured. And Victoria Police, they operated there as a sort of racial profiling for white Australians, because there were local residents in the city of Whitehorse, which is where Box Hill Town Hall, that's where they meet, who got the invitation in their mailbox, but were denied entry because, well, it was billed as a Chinese town hall. Although the Labor candidate for Deakin, Matt Gregg, is white, it appeared to be just for Chinese members of the community. Chris Coveries, Chris De Bruyne, this was his vlog from, I'm not sure if it was him that was there or it was a colleague. He goes all around the place at Chris Coveries, but this is what he filmed, and he tried to confront Penny Wong as she was leaving the event.
The open doors right there. And
So there you go.
and I said that I'll sign in now. I'm happy to sign in now.
Yeah, and that's
not
it.
anything.
So we're happy to sign in. They're only allowing people of a very specific archetype in these doors. It's a closed doors meeting.
We're here to attend what's a public meeting, but apparently, if you've got a ticket, it is a positive ballot.
They just said that's not with us. That's not part of this event.
I've got my ticket. I rang up and I confirmed it, and I'm happy to sign in and give my details.
Yeah.
And I'm here to, got this in the mailbox about.
So you got this in the mailbox. Are you local?
Yes.
So is it Matt Gregg, your film?
Local. So I'm here to speak to him.
There you go.
And they still won't let me in to see what he's got to say.
Unbelievable. So locals are getting these in the mail, and they're coming here, registering their name, registering their address, talking to the police, not being allowed in closed doors. Penny Wong, why has Labor been restricting freedom of speech for Australians? Can you answer to that? Why weren't Australians allowed in tonight to this event?
Well, we saw that one of the red shirt Labor volunteers was a Sikh Indian with a turban. So there were non-Chinese, non-white people there. And now there was Matt Treahy, who heads up the National Workers Alliance, was there with his PA system out the front, as also the Forest of the Fallen. They set up outside the town hall. I think they were there for Dan Andrews because of his vaccine mandates, who was a no-show because he said that he was sick. By the way, I'm not feeling too well tonight either. Been feeling a bit off, but the show must go on. Maybe it's the change in weather, the climate change, because obviously it was hot on Saturday here in Melbourne. Then it was really cold and wet on Sunday, and it appears it's autumn today, but then it's going to be hot again on Wednesday. So remember, there was that news story on 7 News about 6 months ago, how Melbourne's 4 seasons in one day can cause health issues. So maybe that's happening to me while I'm not feeling so good tonight. Now, if Jacinta Allen thought that she'd neutralised the crime issue last night on 60 Minutes, Nick McKenzie was back with a follow-up Building Bad episode about the CFMEU and facilitating organised crime and bikies to run the taxpayer-funded big building sites all across Melbourne. And of course, this is why the state debt is projected to be 178 billion, why there are constant cost blowouts and time delays. So supposedly the Metro train tunnel is opening later this year, as is the Westgate tunnel. What was the most shocking was that a bikie bashed his girlfriend on his lunch break. And then there was another woman, this is Lily Munro. So she was working on a hospital building site, and she was locked in a room and by a man, and he smoked a crack pipe with ice in it and blew it in her face, locking the door of the storeroom. And now so this man worked in traffic management. He was off his head, off his face. Now he was moved to another building site, wasn't sacked. The bikie who assaulted his girlfriend was sacked. But there's also allegations that the Victorian government has tried to cover up this bikie organised crime infiltration, and the investigator that they've got looking into this is not looking at the state government's conduct. Now, Labor tries to champion itself as the party of looking out for women, preventing violence against women, yet their projects, the union movement which they champion, there has been violence and intimidation against women, although of course they can't really identify, don't know the definition of what a woman is. And now I saw Sam Newman today, the post that he's interviewing Mick Gatto again on his You Cannot Be Serious podcast, because in the original Building Bad, Mick Gatto was mentioned for his friendship with the ex-Victorian Secretary of the CFMEU, John Setka. So the whole union has been put into administration now because of this organised crime link that's been exposed. And now I saw this shared by Advance Australia today. Bashed, harassed and blackbanned, CFMEU sides with bikies, not women. Greens leader defends MP's CFMEU rally attendance, because after the CFMEU was put into administration, the Greens housing spokesman Max Chandler Maidler, the member for Griffith, spoke in support of the CFMEU. They said they were defending due process for the members. Will he appearing again after the domestic, well, violence against women has been, and domestic violence has been taking place against on CFMEU affiliated workplaces? Now, going on to the continuing count in the West Australian state election. So it has been going very slow. Yeah, so this is the current state of the count. So only 74.3% has been counted. There's still 5 seats in doubt, though it was very clear from election night. Remember, I was on air with Stephen Berry and Kyle Kutazi. It was very clear on the election night that the Labor Party, led now by Premier Roger Cook, had won a convincing third term, and the Liberal Party, they've gained at least 4 seats and will be the official opposition. The Legislative Council, under the new voting system, so Labor is likely to get 16 out of 37, so they'll have a working majority with the Greens, who won 4. Liberals have won 10, National 2. One Nation have won 1 seat, Legalised Cannabis 1, and the Australian Christians 1. The Libertarian Party came dead last, which I'm not sure how much their ground game was, but clearly it didn't resonate with the West Australian voters. Now, we brought you on our live stream the reports that there were polling stations that had run out of ballots. And this has actually, it's not just this, which happened in the Victorian state election as well, in the seats of Pakenham and Bass, that some polling booths ran out of ballots. Then they were marginal electorates with the Labor Party just won. What has been it now has been focused on, and it had already been revealed, is that the West Australian Electoral Commission outsourced its recruitment of election workers to this Singaporean-based firm, Purcell Kelly. And now there's calls for an inquiry and also a Crime and Corruption Commission investigation into the conduct of the election. This was 9 News Perth last week.
Calls for the Corruption and Crime Commission to investigate the running of the state's state election, or Saturday's election, comes as revelations the company awarded the contract had previously donated tens of thousands of dollars to the Labor Party.
This company was handed an $86 million contract to run an election swirling in controversy, but Purcell Kelly still won't answer questions. Is there someone who can speak to media? So your company doesn't have a media spokesperson? The WA Electoral Commission outsourced recruiting to Purcell Kelly, leading to staff shortages and voters being turned away. Now, Nine can reveal the recruitment firm donated $67,000 to the Labor Party, $13,000 to the Liberals, a smaller donation for the Nationals. Purcell Kelly is owned by a Singaporean company.
This is an absolute show. This actually is terrible. And it is a threat to our democracy.
Shane Love urging the Corruption and Crime Commission to investigate, calling for the Electoral Commissioner's head, who's eluding media.
We need to see Robert Kennedy stood aside, and we need a full and independent review of what the hell is going on. It could materially affect whether or not the Minister for Water is returned to Parliament. That's Simone McGurk, counting continuing in her seat of Fremantle. She's inched ahead of the independent challenger.
Mostly I hope that the WAC is prioritising this seat, not just for my own peace of mind, but also so the Premier can get on and swear in the new cabinet.
The Premier was hoping to decide his new cabinet today. That's now been delayed until next week. Roger Cook vowing that once vote counting is complete, the government will launch an independent investigation into the handling of the election. Conor McGovern, 9.
And all of the opposition parties, major and minor, have now written to the Premier regarding this scandal, failure of the West Australian Electoral Commission. So the letter says, we write to express our grave concern regarding the failures and irregularities observed during the West Australian state election. Reports from across the state that indicate widespread dysfunction have undermined the integrity of the electoral process. While some reports remain unverified, we, the undersigned, personally witnessed or received direct accounts of the following: shortages of ballot papers, keeping voters unable to cast their votes, voters being rejected to other polling locations with some unable to reach the new venue in time to vote, party-appointed scrutineers being asked to assist in the count, voters directed to fill their ballot incorrectly, untrained polling staff struggling to identify voters on the electoral roll, polling staff unaware that there were 2 ballot papers, only issuing lower house ballots to electors. These failures alone would warrant immediate scrutiny, yet revelations that Purcell Kelly, the company contracted by the West Australian Electoral Commission to manage election staffing, donated nearly $70,000 to the WA Labor Party last year, only deepens concerns about the integrity of the process. The potential conflict of interest is unacceptable. The people of Western Australia deserve answers. To restore confidence in our electoral system, we, the undersigned, demand the immediate announcement that the 42nd Parliament will launch a bipartisan parliamentary inquiry exploring Purcell Kelly's practices in recruiting, training and overseeing election staff. The tender process awarded by Purcell Kelly and its contract for the 2025 and 2029 state elections, all communications between Purcell Kelly and WA Labor Party officials, the electoral consequences arising from errors and irregularities of the WA Electoral Commissioner's conduct this election. Every step must be taken to protect the integrity of our electoral system. Anything less than a thorough and transparent investigation would be an insult to the democratic rights of Western Australians. The situation cannot be ignored. So it's signed by the WA Nationals leader, Shane Love, the WA leader of the Liberal Party for now, Libby Metham, the leader of One Nation WA, Ross Cadders, the leader of the Greens, Western Australia. Sorry, the writing's really small here. Brad Pedesti, the Dr. Brian Walker, MLC, leader of Legalised Cannabis, Micah Greenwald, leader of the Australian Christians, and Kate Hutlett, independent for Fremantle. Now, we do have a federal election due in May, and although the Australian Electoral Commission is at least more competent than the West Australian and Victorian Electoral Commissions, remember in 2013, they lost 1,000 votes for the West Australian Senate election that had to be rerun the next year. The Electoral Commissioner resigned. These are not acceptable the fact that, I mean, they should print more than enough ballot papers. That should be, that shouldn't be an issue. The fact we hear about this happening in the United States, and we like, how can this happen? But it's happening in our own country. And now, in the past week, we've had the domestic political fallout from Trump imposing tariffs on our steel and aluminium, or do they say in the US, aluminum. No country got an exemption, although Peter Dutton claims that he could negotiate an exemption, just like Malcolm Turnbull was able to negotiate an exemption, though it took 9 months. And well, they despite that Turnbull and Trump had the worst start to their relationship, where Trump didn't like that he had to honor the deal for the United States to take the illegal immigrants that had arrived in Australia and were offshore in Nauru. But they had a sort of a kiss and make up at the White House. So there's been the back and forth this past week between Turnbull and Trump, though, of course, Turnbull started it, going on Bloomberg saying that Trump's tariffs were benefiting China. And then Trump hit back, and then Turnbull went on ABC 7:30 and then ABC radio the next morning. The short straw says, we copped it because we're a woke country. Well, all the other countries copped it as well. So no other country, even whose leader visited the White House, got an exemption. I mean, Trump's trade envoys, such as Peter Navarro, have claimed that our aluminum is killing their domestic industry. Of course, I don't support tariffs, and I'm glad that the Albanese government has not retaliated with reciprocal tariffs, because that would, of course, hurt us. Now, this has thrown into doubt the future of AUKUS, because Trump is a transactional president, and he could look at the AUKUS submarine deal, where the first nuclear submarines that we're getting are going to be made and produced in the United States, and he might say, this is a terrible deal. Adam Bandt was on ABC Insiders yesterday making the case that this is why AUKUS should be cancelled. But it's bipartisan AUKUS, but it shows that maybe we should have decided to have a contract with Japan to build nuclear submarines in the first place. That was Tony Abbott's preference, but Malcolm Turnbull, of course, negotiated the diesel submarines with France. And also, Anthony Albanese is wanting to sign up to Sir Keir Starmer's coalition of the willing. Shall we call it the coalition of the willing 2.0? Because the original one was under Tony Blair and George W. Bush for the invasion of Iraq. So this coalition of the willing is going to be peacekeeping in Ukraine. So Albanese has said that he is willing to send Australian troops there. The Dutton-led opposition is saying we should focus on our own backyard. We certainly are going to have to spend more on defence, from going from 2% of GDP to 3%. I mean, we'll get better value. We should get better value for money, unless there's, of course, some. There could be some rorting at the shipyards. But it's certainly more value for money than the National Disability Insurance scam. Short Straw says, I'll start collecting aluminium and going to the scrap ward. I mean, it's a myth that you can get rich over the container deposit schemes. All right, let's move on to the major story of the past week, the Dural caravan anti-Semitic terror plot hoax. And now the Australian Federal Police and the New South Wales Police said that all of the anti-Semitic attacks, arson, firebombing over the past 3 months, they were all organized by this organized crime mastermind, Mr. Big, and the caravan full of explosives. Remember, there was no detonator found. It had been lying in Dural for a month. It had a list of targets of Jewish sites with a note in it, "Fuck the Jews." I think the note saying "Fuck the Jews" probably gave it away that this was staged. Now, this was all a plot. It was quite an elaborate plot by Sydney businessman Sayat Erkan Acker, who fled Australia by boat in 2023 while on bail, charged with the alleged importation of 600 kilograms of illicit drugs, which that's quite a lot. So he'd be facing a life in prison sentence. Now, he's a former gym and childcare owner, so he was hoping to leverage a lenient court outcome by providing information about the fabricated plan to police. Now, I would have thought that the fact that this was all orchestrated, he is the foreign actor, Arca, and all of the anti-Semitic vandalism and firebombings, they have all dried up now. At the start of last week, the New South Wales Police and the Federal Police conducted counter-terrorism raids, arresting 14. So it's apparently common for organised crime figures to use a knowledge of purported plots for leverage, though this is maybe the first time that it's been a politically charged plot. And I would say, although I'm not Jewish, so I can't, I don't know how they feel, but I know for myself, I am relieved that this was not organic anti-Semitic terrorism. There's not an endless stream of radicalized Muslim youths from Western Sydney traveling to the eastern suburbs where Jewish people live, targeting Jewish businesses, synagogues, and homes and cars. So I give credit to the New South Wales Police and the Australian Federal Police for foiling this, but there almost seems to be a disappointment from the Jewish lobby and Jewish journalists such as Shari Markson, who I had her on earlier tonight. They are claiming that because Aka is a Muslim, and they uncovered Facebook comments from years back, allegedly from his account, praising Hitler, questioning the Holocaust, posting anti-Semitic comments, that was proof of his that he was motivated by anti-Semitism. Surely, obviously, because he didn't have much of a view of Jews, that's why he wouldn't feel any conscience about organizing all of this. But his motivation was because he would have known there would have been heaps of political pressure on the police and the governments to to stop these anti-Semitic attacks. And so his plan was, well, I'll tell you about where the big one is, and it's this caravan. But he's been found out, so he won't be getting any discount on his sentence, though they've still got to find him overseas if he's been traveling between Turkey and Asia. Now, I saw that pro-Jewish Israel accounts called him a devout Muslim, but this is his wife, Georgia, and this is a photo of them with their child. Now, his wife, Georgia, is not accused of any wrongdoing, but look what she's wearing. She's got long blonde hair. We know she's got long blonde hair because she's not wearing a hijab, and that's a very low cut top there. And so if he is a devout Muslim, I doubt he'd have a wife that would dress like that. I don't know, maybe it's different in Turkey. They're happy to marry women who let it all hang out. Brett Norman says, Sherry pushed the jab. Yes, she did. I read her book, What Really Happened in Wuhan, which was certainly enlightening. And it was interesting, the bit, I remember RFK Jr. being called anti-Semitic because he said that COVID seems to be genetically engineered to spare certain races, including Ashkenazi Jews. But in Sherry Markson's book, she spoke about how viruses can be manipulated to affect certain races more than others. And she is, of course, Jewish herself. So she couldn't be called anti-Semitic for writing that. And also one of the middlemen who is known as the James Bond that orchestrated the torching of two businesses at Bondi Beach in October was a former Nomads bikie chief, Sayat Musawi. And there seem to be, from these pro-Jewish, pro-Israel accounts, basically because they have Middle Eastern names and are of Middle Eastern appearance, that they must have been motivated by anti-Semitism. So Sherry Markson and co, they're still clutching at straws, flogging a dead horse, drawing a long bow, whatever analogy. And Peter Dutton, he has said that, oh, well, there was still massive fear in the community, and he has pledged that that if he wins the next election, he will adopt the 15-point plan to defeat anti-Semitism that was created by Alex Rifkin of the Executive Council of Australian Jewry, who co-hosted it with Sherry Markson. So this is what Peter Dutton is going to do as Prime Minister. So the federal government declaring a national emergency of anti-Semitism and a joint counter-terrorism task force led by a single minister to coordinate and mobilize all relevant agencies in the fight against anti-Semitic terror. Do we need one now, since it's all dried up? Uniform policy guidance should be established, and intelligence law enforcement should be trained in understanding what anti-Semitism is and how is it expressed, so they can identify and prosecute those who commit crimes. So that includes legal and health professionals. Anti-Semitism education should be included within the national curriculum. I thought it was. We all learned about the Holocaust in school. A public awareness and advertising campaign to debunk the ideology of anti-Semitism and undermine its appeal, directed at young audience. There should be a national ban on encampments, the disruption of lectures by student protesters. a judicial inquiry into anti-Semitism at Australian universities, which should include the investigation of foreign funding of student protests. Universities must disclose all sources of funding from foreign governments and foundations linked to foreign governments or of listed terrorist organisations. There needs to be legislation to overcome restrictions on disciplinary action against academics who support violence or vilify students, preachers, and charities spreading hate. Religious and other charitable institutions should have their charity status and funding revoked if they promote racism, including anti-Semitism, to display terrorist symbols. Greater scrutiny on the sources and use of funds administered by charities to ensure they not use to support terrorism, carry out any activities outside of their charitable purpose. Migration and Citizenship Act. Immigration officers must be trained to recognise anti-Semitism and to assess whether applicants have promoted anti-Semitism, which would disqualify them under the character test. This is particularly relevant for those seeking entry in places with pervasive anti-Semitic education. The Migration Act should be enforced or, if necessary, amended so that anti-Semitic conduct is grounds to refuse a new visa or cancel an existing visa. The introduction of algorithm regulation legislation as a national security, counter and foreign intelligence priority. This legislation would target hostile dictatorships as part of the social media. A part of the 15-point plan, cultural institution government grants to festivals and individuals come with the condition that the recipient does not spread racism and that grants can be revoked. There must be a balance of representation on literary and cultural festival boards among senior staff responsible for programming choices. And now, today, Peter Dutton was at the Abbas Melbourne Synagogue, which, of course, was the first major anti-Semitic arson attack, which, as far as we know, is not connected to this organised crime plot. He was there to pledge $35 million of taxpayers' money to restore the synagogue. He was there with his shadow Home Affairs Minister, James Paterson, who is a hardcore Zionist, and with the Liberal Jewish member for Caulfield, David Southwick, the Liberal candidate for the seat of Goldstein and former member Tim Wilson, and the Liberal candidate for the seat of McNamara, which is held by Labor Jew Josh Frydenberg. Their candidate is Benson Salu, who has actually Papuan heritage. And also, it has been broken in the Age tonight that Peter Dutton is promising us a fresh referendum to give politicians the ability to deport dual citizens. Because this would basically mean that the separation of powers in the Constitution, because the High Court has ruled that only the judiciary can strip citizenship from dual citizens, and also to get around the High Court decision, which meant that the Australian government couldn't detain the illegal criminal migrants indefinitely where there was no prospect of resettlement. And also Julie and Lisa told the Australian Jewish Association that they'd be prepared to go for a referendum if the court struck down the ministers cancelling, revoking visas for those convicted of anti-Semitic crimes, which obviously the judiciary we're seeing in the United States, they like to be the ultimate decider. They are accountable to nobody, but it's a sign of how much Peter Dutton is willing to go on this. The Liberal Party is willing to go. I don't think such a referendum would succeed because there's so many migrants now who have dual citizenship, and there'd be enough of them to scuttle a referendum. Labor would oppose it, saying that this has racist undertone, and most referendums don't succeed, especially when there's not bipartisan support. Now, because the caravan full of explosives with a list of Jewish targets and the note "fuck the Jews" was found to be a hoax. Obviously, most people who saw the details like, this looks sus, this looks like it was planted there. There are now calls to repeal the hate crime laws, the anti-free speech laws that were passed by the federal parliament and the New South Wales Parliament in the aftermath of the reporting of this caravan full of explosives, because they were passed under false pretenses. Well, they shouldn't have been passed at all to begin with, but particularly under false pretenses. And now, Libertarian New South Wales MLC, John Ruddick, last week wrote of his intention that he would move to repeal the recently passed anti-free speech laws. Yesterday afternoon, police from Strikefest Poll made a shocking revelation about the wave of what appeared to be alarming anti-Semitic incidents in New South Wales. Police arrested 14 people for their alleged involvement in these incidents. The shock of the motive of these attacks was not hate, but criminal. The police have referred to the attacks as criminal con jobs. It was not just the caravan plot. There were 14 other anti-Semitic attacks across New South Wales over the summer period that now appear to be related to a criminal enterprise. There are still many answered questions, but it appears it may have been masterminded by a foreign organised crime ring who played local street criminals to conduct false flag operations. Their motives appear to be an attempt to engineer reduced sentence in exchange for tip-offs about these attacks. AP Deputy Commissioner Chrissy Barrett said almost immediately experienced investigations believe the caravan was part of a fabricated plot, a criminal con job. Regardless of our state and federal parliaments acted in a knee-jerk manner and rushed these new laws and Fertentine as laws against free speech. Legislation would not have existed without these incidents, and after yesterday's revelations, it is now very likely that they were based on false pretenses of criminals. In the next sitting week of Parliament, I would wish to repeal legislation to remove these illegitimate laws. Free speech matters more than bad laws. And John Ruddick went on ABC News to talk about his repeal bill as well.
There's a push to repeal the Men's government's hate speech laws. Police say a spate of arson and graffiti attacks at Sydney's East don't appear to have been motivated by anti-Semitism, and that an explosive-laden caravan was actually a criminal hoax. Crossbenchers are accusing the government of abusing the parliamentary process to rush through legislation eroding civil liberties.
It was anti-Semitic graffiti like this which spurred the government to make urgent reform.
A childcare centre deliberately set on fire. Nazi slogans copied from the darkest pages of history, spray painted across Jewish cars and Jewish property.
More than a dozen people have been charged over attacks police now believe were not driven by anti-Semitism, but rather organised crime. However, not before the Parliament passed legislation criminalising the incitement of racial hatred.
We know now it was a criminal con job that whipped up the hysteria. Laws are not made well in that environment. We need to soberly assess things.
Libertarian MP John Ruddick will introduce legislation next week repealing the hate speech laws.
Is New South Wales happy with the idea that a wacky criminal conspiracy has now eroded our free speech principles?
What do people want the right to say?
The Premier is standing by the reforms.
This is a Premier that wants to seem strong in the media, so will throw out significant legislative reform as if it's a whim.
The bomb threat might have been a hoax, but the fear it led to was real. Jewish groups have affirmed their support for the new hate speech laws, saying the changes were needed regardless of what motivated acts of vandalism and arson.
This legislation does risk weaponising attacks on legitimate free speech. That's why we've argued for a sunset clause.
The new hate speech offence will be reviewed after 12 months and will automatically expire after 3 years. Alexander Lewis, ABC News, Sydney.
Well, it was good to see the Liberal opposition leader, Mark Speakman, express concerns and argue for a sunset clause. Now, Chris Minns released a statement last week, essentially doubling down. I want to make it clear the New South Wales government will not be repealing hate speech laws passed in Parliament last month. Our laws criminalise intentionally publicly inciting hatred towards another person or group based on race. They send a clear message: the people of New South Wales stand together against inciting racial hatred in our great multicultural state. New South Wales has seized hundreds of anti-Semitic attacks and incidents. The racial hatred has caused our Jewish community to live in fear in their own state. While the caravan was part of a criminal conspiracy and not part of a terrorist plot, it was still appalling racial hatred. It targeted the Jewish community, it targeted a racial group to instill terror in our state. Well, he is calling it terrorism. While these laws were drafted in response to horrifying anti-Semitism, we've always made clear they would apply to anyone preying on any person at any time. In response to calls for laws to be scrapped, doing so would be a toxic message to our community. This type of hate speech is acceptable when it's not. The laws are very important to maintaining social cohesion, that buzzword again. Now, there have been calls by the Libertarian MLC John Ruddock and the Greens MLCs for a parliamentary inquiry into what the Minns government knew about the hoax caravan when they were passing these hate speech laws, anti-free speech laws, because the New South Wales Police said they basically knew it was a hoax right away. And John Ruddock has said we could be dealing with a Watergate level cover-up. But last week, Sherry Markson, she was outraged there could be some sort of inquiry about the Minns government not being forthcoming with the New South Wales public before they passed these laws. And this is an example of what Sherry Markson is like for an hour, 4 nights a week on Sky News.
Now, I also want to say here that I've approached Mark Speakman's office tonight for comment to get reassurance that he's not going to get in on this and demand that there's a parliamentary inquiry on these hate speech laws. I couldn't contact Mark Speakman. He's in a regional area. But if the coalition sides with the Greens, with the Libertarians, with some aggrieved Labor MPs just to attack Chris Minns, then this would be an indictment on the coalition in New South Wales. An absolute indictment. It would be unforgivable for the New South Wales coalition if they don't stand firm with Chris Minns on this.
Unforgivable, according to you? Would you go to, Sherry Markson, would you go to war against the New South Wales Liberal Party? Do you believe that you're that powerful with your platform on Sky News at 8 p.m. 4 nights a week? That's not journalism, that's activism and being a political player. Although she stopped being an objective journalist long ago. I mean, she's shrill and hysterical all the time on Sky News. I mean, Caroline Marcus, who's also Jewish on Sky News, is not as bad, but she's also made it very clear that she's not a free speech absolutist if it's speech against Jews, as was demonstrated by her words against Joel Davis's speech at the NSN Jews Hate Freedom rally outside the Victorian Parliament House. Now, the National Council of Imams last week released a statement in the aftermath of it, revealed the caravan being a hoax, saying that this hoax led to attacks on the Islamic community. And of course, the Albanese government has said that that we condemn anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, though of course they haven't mentioned Christophobia, the Syrian Christians being slaughtered under the new Islamist regime, also those Christians being slaughtered in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Nigeria and Mali, and it was Saturday. It was International Day Against Islamophobia. So I didn't know that this was a thing until Anthony Albanese posted it on his social media. Now, I'm not sure if I've got the post from Anthony Albanese. Just bear with me. Oh yes, here it is. Here, I'll read it straight from his X account. And I should read it in Elbow's voice, I reckon. On this International Day to combat Islamophobia, Australia stands firm against any expression of or act of hatred or hostility towards the Muslim community. We will not tolerate Islamophobia in any form. It has no place in Australia, and we will combat it with the full force of our laws. It goes against all we are as a nation and all that we have built together over generations. On our reflections on this day, take on more meaning because it coincides with the anniversary of the Christchurch mosque shootings, where 55 people had their lives stolen in what should have been a place of deepest sanctuary. So many more have had their lives changed forever. The Muslim community has long been part of the breadth and the richness of the Australian story, playing an important part in shaping the face of a modern nation. Like all Australians, they have the right to be proud of who they are and follow their faith freely and openly, a central part of our shared Australian identity. Indeed, one of our greatest national treasures is that we celebrate our diversity and our inclusive spirit. That is something to be cherished and upheld, and we will oppose anything that threatens that. So basically, diversity is our strength. And also this weekend, it was the Hindu festival of Holi. And Peter Dutton, because I should, and I pointed this out to Ozpil as well. Obviously, he goes after Albanese in the comments because he's overseeing the Indian mass migration at the moment, but it's bipartisan. Peter Dutton's going to keep it going. He posted on X, wishing all Australians of Hindu faith and everyone joining in the celebrations a happy and colourful Holi. To our Australian Indian community, thank you for your many contributions in art, business, values, and culture, which make our nation better. Australia is the greatest country in the world, in no small part because of important traditions like Holi that strengthen our nation and bring communities together. Holi ki sabago. And I think that's the Hindi translation there. And I should also mention that the Liberal Party did not criticise the Labor Chinese town hall because they want to get the Chinese vote as well. Keith Wallahan wants to hang on to his seat of Menzies, which has the highest proportion of Chinese Australians in the country, and they also want to win back Chisholm from the Labor Party as well. Not to be outdone, Jason Clare, the Minister for Education, and the member for Blaxland, which, well, it's the largest Muslim, a proportion of Muslims in his electorate in the country, but there would be also many Hindus there. So he posted tonight, the Prime Minister and I announced that Labor will support the establishment of the first Hindu school right here in Western Sydney. There are more than 684,000 Hindus in Australia, and it's about time their vision to have a school is realised. Great to celebrate Full Dole and Holi at Kemps Creek, the site of the new Hindu temple, with BAPDS Australia and His Holiest Manhat Swami Madri. Why is our federal government supporting the establishment of a Hindu school which will encourage the continued segregation, ghettoization of Australia? And do you remember it was on 9 News a couple of weeks ago? It went viral on X that in Western Sydney, there's been this giant statue erected, 49 foot tall, of Neil Cath Varney. So it is one of the tallest metal structures in Australia. I don't think that there is a statue of Christ that is bigger than that. I think in Catholic countries like Brazil there are, but would they approve one of Jesus Christ? Would these, I mean, some Christians in the lead up to Easter should organise for the funding of that. Now, we had before final few bits of Australian news. We had the Australian Human Rights Commission last week publish a report into various Australians' experiences with the COVID pandemic. It was called collateral damage. So I'll just bring it up here. So it was primarily authored by Lorraine Finlay, who has been a good appointment to the Australian Human Rights Commission. She co-authored with Augusto Zimmerman, a good friend of the Unshackled and been a regular guest on Wilms Front, a book which discussed if 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act was unconstitutional. So it was basically to give a voice to Australians about particularly how they were negatively experienced all of the COVID lockdown restrictions, such as not being able to see dying relatives in the hospital. So the key findings were human rights are not an afterthought. One size does not fit all. Emergency measures must always be proportionate. Balance risk with compassion. Effective communication is essential. Local knowledge creates better results. Recovery planning can't just start after the emergency. And the findings were a majority felt that people generally acted for the greater good of the community during the pandemic. And people largely felt a responsibility to follow public health guidelines, although there were substantial pockets of dissent, particularly in relation to the forced wearing of masks and mandatory vaccines. Around 2 in 5 people said their experience during the pandemic was neutral. Around 2 in 5 said they were disadvantaged. 1 in 5 said they benefited on balance. Around 3 in 5 agreed that the Australian government did a good job in handling the pandemic. And experience of the pandemic that had a negative impact the most, being unable to meet with family or friends, that was 12.6%. Fear of catching COVID-19, 10.5%. Inability of where I wanted to go because of lockdowns, 10.3%. So it mentions here that a lot of people they feared catching COVID and long COVID on the whole is like bullshit. But of course they all got COVID in the end and found out that it was no big deal. And now also we had last week, Clive Palmer addressed the National Press Club to promote his, well, it's not his new party, but he's basically going to be funding all of the advertisement and is the party chairman of the Trumpet of Patriots. So the official leader is Suellen Wrightson. So she fronts a lot of the TV commercials. And there's also been many front page newspaper ads. And the one that there was a backlash to, you could have probably predicted this, was the one there are only 2 genders, male and female. So the Newcastle Herald, they apologised for this, and its parent company, Australian Community Media, said that they fell short in their processes allowing this ad to be on the front of the paper. And this was published on the Newcastle Herald's Facebook page. Apology to our readers. On Tuesday, a political advertisement for the Trumpeter Patriots Party appeared on page 1 of our Newcastle Herald. The advertisement offended many of our readers and did not meet our values as a company. It should not have appeared. ACM, the publisher of the Herald, has checks in place for political advertising, but on this occasion the process failed and the advertisement was not reviewed before publication. The advertisement has been withdrawn from our e-edition and will not be published again. We support freedom of speech and diversity of views, but the but is that they don't support freedom of speech and diversity of views. But on this occasion, we let our readers and our staff down. Australian Community Media and the Herald apologise unreservedly to our readers and the transgender community and the Newcastle community more broadly for any hurt and distress caused by the publication of the advertisement. And there was also a revolt from the Age staff writing to the editors and management because they carried on their front page that there are only 2 genders. I mean, it's Clive Palmer's ads and Harvey Norman wraparound advertisements that are keeping the print edition of the papers afloat. But I'll make the point that even if you're pro-trans, isn't the idea of transitioning from one of the 2 genders, sexes to the other? I mean, that's the whole point of a transaction. It's going from one to the other. So male to female or female to male. So how can transgender people be offended by that? Of course, non-binary is that's just a cry for attention. All right, going to some international news, which I actually covered on the unshackled.net this week, and that was that this was pretty big news, that former president of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte, was arrested in the nation's capital, Manila, on Tuesday on an International Criminal Court, ICC, that's the acronym, arrest warrant for crimes against humanity. So he's now been extradited to The Hague in the Netherlands, which the ICC, that's where it's headquartered, to face trial. So this relates to his war on drugs during his presidency, because there were lots of extrajudicial killings by authorities encouraged by him. And when before he was president, he was the mayor of Davao City, and he claimed he used to execute drug dealers himself. Now, the official death toll from his war on drugs during the 6 years of his presidency was 7,000, though human rights groups estimate the death toll to be more than 30,000 and claim that innocents were executed. Now, it's a backflip by the current president, Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr., who previously said the government would not cooperate with any ICC investigation to recognize their jurisdiction. And he was elected on a unity ticket with Duterte's daughter, Sarah, serving as vice president, but they've fallen out, and Sarah Duterte has been impeached by the Congress of the Philippines for misusing government funds. So, but the thing is that that Duterte withdrew from the ICC in 2019, so he's being indicted on the crimes against humanity that he is alleged to have committed while the Philippines was still in the ICC. Now, this is obviously a big scalp for the ICC, but it will have no impact on the legitimacy of their arrest warrant for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Minister of Defense for Israel, Yoav Gallant, for war crimes and crimes against humanity during the Israel-Gaza war, because Israel nor the United States is part of the ICC, and other countries that are part of the ICC said that because the United States is not part of the ICC, we're not going to enforce the arrest warrant. So the Trump administration put sanctions against the ICC because of the Netanyahu arrest warrants. So yeah, and see those who, and again, like these international bodies, they really have no jurisdiction. Really, they're just show trials basically. Short Straw says, love your work, Tim. How long have been doing YouTube? I've been here since the start. Since 2016 was the beginning of the Unshackled. And now the Reform Civil War has continued. When I say Reform Civil War, I mean the UK Reform Party. So Rupert Lowe, he has had the whip removed, which is just code for suspension, because he was under investigation for bullying in his office. Though his staff have come out and said it's not the bullying allegations are nothing to do with him. We love working for him, but there was also an allegation that he threatened the chairman of Reform, the Muslim British billionaire Zaya Youssef, and also that he had to be restrained after being enraged by a Labor minister's answer during a question time in the House of Commons. And now Farage just kept doubling down on his personal attacks and, well, false attacks on Rupert Lowe. Now, obviously, the ex-nationalist community loves him, but pollsters such as Matt Goodwin have said, look, we all live in a bubble here on X, and most regular voters don't know who Rupert Lowe is, but they recognise Nigel Farage, love and hate him. So, and so far it's not affecting the Reform's lead in the polls against the Labor Starmer government and the Conservative opposition led by Kemi Badenoch. So Nigel Farage, he would be thinking, look, I have seen off dissidents before, but he was interviewed, I can't remember, by it's your political career. There's been a roadside of political corpses, and before Rupert Lowe, there of course was Ben Habib, the former deputy Reform leader. But as I said last week, Nigel Farage's strategy seems to ride it out, because he believes that nobody outside of the nationalist bubble on X, he really cares about Rupert Lowe. I mean, he is the base member of Reform. It is true, like we used to say, Twitter was not real life. X is not real life. I remember a lot of us dared to dream during the UK general election campaign that the Conservatives could win 0 seats. That didn't happen. They won 131 and Reform only won 5. So we do, there is this algorithm feed where we think that our views are more popular than they actually are. I like to remain very grounded in the real world, the real community. And it's fair to say that that a lot of the general public don't know about a lot of the issues that we're raising and are too busy just trying to make ends meet. Obviously, as things start to progressively get worse, I'm not an accelerationist. I don't like to see our standard of living, our safety fall away. I wish this wasn't the case. Now, over to the United States. Donald Trump the Trump administration negotiated a 30-day ceasefire proposal with Ukraine, though Vladimir Putin has said that he's not really interested because it would mean that Ukraine would just be able to rearm. That's sort of the same justification that the Netanyahu government gave for not wanting a ceasefire with Hamas, because it would allow them to rebuild. So Trump has said if Putin rejects the ceasefire, then it's not going to be very good for him. But how many more sanctions can you slap on Russia? I mean, they were supposed to be crippled 3 years ago. We weren't allowed to buy Russian vodka. But of course, Russia just created their own alternative economic alliance, BRICS, which stands for Brazil, China, Russia, Iran, and Saudi Arabia, I think. Oh no, the S stands for South Africa. Sorry. Tricky Woo says invaders built a huge fugly idol in Canadistan too. Well, I also call it Cut Canadistan. And Mark Carney, the new Prime Minister, is ahead in the polls now because he's basically neutralised all the issues that Conservative opposition leader Pierre Poilievre has been championing. And obviously the Trump tariff war has benefited the Liberal government, and we'll see how it plays out domestically, but there is so much more anti-American sentiment in Canada. He said that he wants to make, because Trump said he wants to make Canada the 51st state of America. The American national anthem is booed in Canada when it's played before National Hockey League, NFL, I think they have it in all of the major US sports leagues. There's at least one Canadian team in it. So when they play each other, they play both anthems, and it's the US anthem is booed in Canada. So the Liberal government has been able to, which was so far behind in the polls, being able to galvanise this nationalist sentiment, and the Conservatives are floundering. Peter Dutton here has been eager to say that he is not Trumpian. He's in the mold of John Howard and Peter Costello. Now, Donald Trump, his deportation, you would say, enactment has now moved on to those who his administration has deemed is taking part in anti-Semitic pro-Hamas activism. So there has been this green card holder, Mohammed Khalil, who was born in Syria as a Palestinian refugee, has been arrested and detained because he organized a pro-Palestinian encampments at Columbia University. But a federal judge in New York, Jesse Furman, issued an order temporarily halting his deportation to reserve the court jurisdiction while legal proceedings continue. Now, I saw Claire Lehman's latest crusade against the Trump administration is that, oh, hey, how can you be cheering on the deportation of these alleged criminal gang members without due process? Some are going to El Salvador. So the president over there is basically building the world's largest prison, Nayib Bukele. It's the new penal colony, the new Australia. So it's going to be a dumping ground, but the courts are, again, like in Australia, they like to be the ultimate decider. But what is the most egregious is that of the judicial interference is that basically saying the Trump administration has to spend money that's being cut from US aid. The money is appropriated from Congress, so they have the powers of the purse. And now, because Congress appropriates money, that doesn't mean that the administration has to spend it, though the courts are ordering to suspend it. Though a Congressman, Thomas Massey, who Trump has decided to go to war against, has said that the Republican-controlled Congress could endorse all of the DOGE cuts with rescission bills, so take back the spending. Because Donald Trump this week decided to go to war against Thomas Massey for voting against the continuing resolution, which basically kicks the can down the road. So rather than have a new budget, have 12 proper appropriations bills, or have a budget reconciliation, just continue to fund the existing government, which the judges are striking down Trump's spending cuts. So Donald Trump has decided to go to war against Thomas Massey. Thank you to the House Freedom Caucus for just delivering a big blow to the radical left Democrats and their desire to raise taxes and shut our country down. They hate America and all it stands for. That's why they allowed millions of criminals to invade our nation. Sometimes it takes great courage to do the right thing. Congressman Thomas Massey of beautiful Kentucky's automatic no vote on everything, despite the fact that he's always voted for continuing resolutions in the past. He should be primary or lead the charge against him. He is just another grandstander who's too much trouble and not worth the fight. Reminds me of Liz Cheney before her historic record-breaking fall loss. The people of Kentucky won't stand for it. Just watch. Do I have any takers? Anyway, thank you again to the House Freedom Caucus for your very important vote. We need to buy some time in order to make America great again, greater than ever before. Unite and win. Well, the reason why Thomas Massey, he explained why he voted for continuing resolutions in the past, because they contained some spending cuts. This did not contain spending cuts. And now there was an attempt to primary Thomas Massey in the last congressional election cycle by IAPAC, the American Israel Political Action Committee. Thomas Massey, he was the only Republican member of Congress to refuse to show up to Benjamin Netanyahu's speech in Congress. He told Tucker Carlson that basically every member of Congress has an IAPAC handler, and he's got a sign on his door that foreign lobbyists are not welcome here. And it's important to grandstand. If Congress should do its job, and Trump should encourage them to do their job. The Congress seems to just be lazy. Well, when it comes to when it's Republican controlled, I mean, they should. It's the executive orders that Donald Trump is passing, say, for example, recognizing two genders, they can just simply be reversed by the next Democrat president. But if Congress actually passed a law recognizing only two genders across the federal government, then that has a lot more authority that the next president would have to try and go to the Congress to get it repealed. And this is why the Democrats, when they get congressional majorities, they actually use it. The most prominent example is Obamacare, passed when the Obama had the White House, the Democrats controlled the House and the Senate. That's why Biden, he was caught on a hot mic when embracing Obama after it passed, said this is a big fucking deal. Because Obamacare is still law, because when the Republicans had control of the Congress last time and Trump was president, they couldn't repeal Obamacare. So the Democrats, the Republicans in a way should be more like the Democrats and pass laws while they've got control of the House, Senate, and the White House like the Democrats do. Otherwise, well, it's likely in 2026 that the Democrats will win back the House. Then it's a divided Congress, and then Trump is hamstrung again during his final 2 years. So how do we know that the can is not going to be kicked down the road at the next continuing resolution to continuing to fund the government? Because Thomas Massey made the point that it's funding Biden's programs. That's what continuing resolutions, not. This is why Congress should actually do a budget. And sometimes it's important to grandstand and say, look, because Doge is only making, although its cuts are good, it's only cuts around the edges. Congress needs to make substantial cuts. And Thomas Massey, he is a congressman in the great, who carries the legacy of the great Ron Paul, who was known as Dr. No for voting against his own party on anything that raised taxes, expanded government, or interfered in foreign nations. Now, also there has been a whole bunch of Tesla terrorism. So there have been Tesla factories and showrooms set on fire. There was a Tesla that some Antifa had put a swastika into a Jewish man's Tesla in New York. Luckily, he didn't do this in Australia. Otherwise, we're looking at mandatory 12 months in prison. But it's sort of this, because largely the radical left has stopped their pro-Palestine activism. Now it's anti-Tesla activism. But there's always been the Antifa terrorists, and how come they seem to be committing all of this arson without impunity? I mean, Kash Patel and Dan Bongino need to crack down on this quick smart. Why there's been decades and decades of left-wing terrorism across the United States, and it just seems to continue. There just seems to be no deterrence. And now, Democrat Senator for Arizona, Mark Kelly, said he gave up his Tesla because it reminds him of Elon Musk and Doge. And now I saw Claire Lehman. She's also raging against the cuts, Elon Musk cuts to science, that it means that the US government is not funding critical science. Well, who is rescuing the stranded astronauts on the International Space Station? Not the United States funded NASA. It is Elon Musk's SpaceX. So SpaceX it's a commercial space enterprise. So science, that shows that science can be advanced without a government grant. And now it's still pending before the Senate, Jay Bhattacharya's confirmation as the National Institute for Health director. So they're not challenging him on the Great Barrington Declaration anymore in his opposition to the lockdowns. They're saying, oh, what are you going to cut? Also, did anyone see Michelle Obama's new podcast with her big brother, Craig Robinson, who I actually looked it up, is a celebrity in his own right. He was a college basketball coach and is now a pundit. People said that Michelle, the Big Mike, looks like the man, and Craig Robinson looks like the women. And it's got bugger all views, their podcast, and it's so dull. They were discussing why isn't a hot dog and a burger considered a sandwich? This is the sort of content filler that they have on FM radio programs, but at least they make it entertaining. That was just the most boring discussion ever. I mean, with love with Meghan Markle, at least that is engaging. They make it engaging, even though it's completely fake. But most people are hate watching it because when Meghan is cooking something, there's a cut from clearly she didn't really bake it or baked it wrong, and then there's a cut and it's a completely different cake. All right, that's the end of Tim's News Explosion for another week. Thank you so much for your company and your support, which remember, I cannot do this without also your financial support. So please consider supporting the Unshackled and Unshackled Productions through a premium membership on the unshackled.net/membership. So bronze $5 per month, $50 per year, silver $10 per month, $100 per year, gold $25 per month, $250 per year, platinum $50 per month, $500 per year. And that's, of course, where Unshackled articles are. Now over at Substack, that is where I publish and email upcoming Unshackled productions, such as tonight's Tim's News Explosion. So there is monthly $5 per month, annual $50 per year, and founding member $500 per year. I hope everyone enjoyed my Wilms Front interview last Friday with Dang Pal, the pro-white black nationalist who's of South Sudanese descent. So I've got some other Wilms Front interviews in the works. I'll let you know when they are locked in. There'll be new reports from Tiger Moat with Richard Wollstonecroft later in the week. Remember to like, comment, thumbs up, and share as well. Make sure you subscribe, click the bell for notifications. I will be back on Reality Check Radio tomorrow with my now fortnightly Wilms report with Paul Brennan. So the website is rcr.media. That's the new website. So back with him with my Wilms Australian report tomorrow. So keep an eye out for that. Download the RCR app. I will see you definitely next Tim's News Explosion, same time at 8:30 p.m. on all the Wilms Front channels. The replays, of course, are uploaded to Odyssey as well, and also available on podcasting platforms as well. That's maybe where you're viewing and listening the replay. Good night, everybody.
Tim's News Explosion. 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 Tim's News Explosion.